Good evening and welcome to Small Time TV. I'm your host for this evening. My name is Katie Wighton and I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation who are the custodians of the land on which we meet tonight. We have a very special guest this evening. Her name is Celia Rasmussen and she is here all the way from Austin, Texas. Welcome, Celia.
Thank you.
No worries. How's Australia so far?
It's been wonderful.
Yeah?
It's been really great. Amazing people, beautiful weather, and this venue that's come together. I got in on last Sunday, about 3 days before it opened, and seen it all come together crazy quickly, and it's beautiful, and it's been really wonderful.
Pretty impressive, huh?
Yeah, very impressive.
Have you seen any kangaroos yet?
I did go to the zoo a few days ago. Saw
That counts.
some small kangaroos.
Wallabies,
They were just
yep.
lounging and checked my little box there.
Absolutely.
To see some kangaroos.
Fantastic. Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
So obviously we're not going to talk about the flora and fauna of Australia, although it would be an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
But just to give you a little wrap, for those of you who haven't crossed paths with Celia yet, she is a dynamo. She's achieved a lot in the short years she's been doing her thing. She's currently working in the marketing team for 888 Management, working with bands like the Eli Young Band, Jay Nichols, Pat Green, Kevin Fowler, and the last few years she's been working on a little festival that some of you may have heard of called South by Southwest with some tiny little artists that you may or may not have heard of. Billie Eilish, Lizzo, Khalid. Anyway, I'm actually going to pass this over to you, Celia. I'm wondering if you can give us, if you had a best of compilation CD of your career highlights,
Sure.
What would they be? The hits, no B-sides.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, my time at South by, I was a music partner programming coordinator. So I worked on kind of being the middleman between agents and artists and sometimes labels and sometimes management, and connecting with big brands who were usually sales clients anytime they wanted music talent at their showcases. So yeah, we did some big shows and we also did a lot of little ones that were fun, kind of passion projects. It was a huge learning experience.
Yeah.
Just getting to see that whole side of the industry and how festivals are produced and everything that goes into it. I worked on a very small part of it in terms of the production. But yeah, I mean, just learned a crazy amount, and the festival itself, it usually ends up being about 10 days of just like crazy chaos running around
And you were in
sure.
the music partner programming team. So does that mean you approached artists? Did artists approach you? How did that kind of transpire?
We typically had meetings with agencies, all the big agencies in America. So like WME, Paradigm, CAA, UTA, and we would just kind of get a list from those agents on which of their clients were interested in coming to South by or any goals that they had, specifically if they had art releases coming out around the time of South by. And then we would take that list and compile it into a giant database that we kept. And anytime we had clients approach us saying that they wanted music at their showcase, we would go through the list and see, what would be the best fit, depending on budget and genre and, what the artist was trying to accomplish in their time at South by. So it was a big kind of conglomerate of a crazy amount of information, but it usually came together sometimes 2 months within the event, sometimes 2 weeks before, and
The nature of it
worked out. Yeah.
And how did you separate the artists from each other? So I mean, because I would assume you'd have lots of different artists pitched to you, and how would it work? Were there certain commonalities between the artists that you ended up choosing to pitch to brands, or?
Yeah, I think so. I did a lot of, I worked with my boss, who was the director of that department, but it was really just the two of us. And depending on the showcase, sometimes I would have a much better feel for what the client wanted. So, for example, like Doc Martens usually went for a pretty like grungy, fun rock and roll vibe. And I had a list that I knew like, okay, they want, this level talent, usually on the lower end, and they were all about exposing up and coming artists and supporting them. And then other times, you had a client like Netflix that wanted to keep it like a secret kind of underground speakeasy vibe, and they got really, really big talent and only like special people got to go. So you had to get the feel for the Netflix showcases were obviously centered around a show or anything that they were working on. So that was like, okay, I know exactly what I'm going for because there's a theme of this TV show. Yeah. And then other times you had to completely wing it. It would be like just some tech company and, they're just like, we just want what's trendy. Yeah, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what we get and see what you like. So yeah, it definitely varied case by case.
And did you find, were you mostly liaising with management or were you talking directly with artists?
It was mostly agents, for the most part. And then sometimes the artists themselves. And that was usually pretty refreshing. Because they're just happy to play. And then occasionally management, occasionally label. It just kind of depended on what was going on in the artist's cycle and what they were trying to accomplish. But for the most part, you had agents because they're the ones that are trying to make the band some money.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Okay, cool. And in terms of your experience with Triple Eight, can you talk to us a little bit about what you've been working on there and your experience generally in the management realm?
Yeah. So I kind of come full circle. I played in a band with my sisters for a long time when I was really young, and then got a little burnt out, and I thought about management, but I was like, I just think I should stay out of the music business for a while, like try something new. And then working at South by, I was just like kind of the whole time wishing that I was on the artist side and wishing that I was dealing with them like one-on-one. Like, I want to be the manager that gets to make these decisions. Like, are they going to play this showcase? Or, have some input there. And so leaving South by, I just started out as an intern at Triple Eight, and it was a fantastic experience. I just kind of did like whatever was given to me, and it's a great group of people. It's a small office in Austin, maybe around 15 people. And then we've got another office in Nashville. It's a little bit more busy there naturally. A lot of our clients live in Nashville. But I am a marketing assistant, so I do mostly tour marketing, and then when an artist has an album or a single release coming out, any sort of preparation that needs to go into that. So a lot of it's just kind of like being creative and coming up with campaigns that we can do to, reach our audience. And then, once that album has come out, like how do we keep everyone engaged? And how do we keep, the thing alive and not just like fizzle out? So, so I found myself, back in the management world, and I love it. And I'm hoping to become a day-to-day manager within the next few years. But yeah, Triple Eight is a wonderful, wonderful group of people. I feel very supported, and they see my vision and my path, and so I'm just working to get there.
Yeah. And so in terms of you're talking about it being a wonderful organization and great people, and obviously you respect them as managers. What are some of the traits you've noticed in what you would call a good manager?
Sure. Well, obviously, like having the capacity to separate your personal life and the management. I mean, a lot of people consider managers just like glorified babysitters. So the sacrifice that I see a lot of my coworkers make with their personal lives is incredible, and their families, dealing with that. But it's the passion, and it's the energy and the encouragement that they give their artists. Obviously, we want to see artists that are incredibly motivated and want to work really hard, and they have to make sacrifices in their own world. And so, I see a lot of that, and a lot of it's just like, we'll get together. It was bi-weekly, now it's monthly, but as a company in Austin, we'll get together once a month now and just kind of have conversations about what's going on in our clients' worlds, because not everybody works on the same projects.
Yeah.
And so getting to hear a little bit of insight about whatever project they're working on, or maybe they've got an idea for a tour announce, or this album's coming out, or what sort of creative direction they want to go in. I love those because I get to hear like just any sort of creative thinking that they have, and I've always thought of myself as like not a super creative person.
Even though you were in a band.
Even though I was in a band, like I don't know, I could never be a songwriter. Like I don't have that just like I need to get what's in my brain out into the world.
Yeah.
And so they're very inspiring, and just they're trying to be, unique, and it takes a lot to stand out in the music industry these days. And so another thing is just like servicing our artists and making sure that they know that we're doing everything we can to service them and their fan bases and in a continued capacity.
And is there a specific example of where you've been at one of these meetings and been like, wow, that's a great idea from you for your artist, and
Sure.
why?
I have to think about that.
We can come back to that.
Yeah,
question.
One example would be one of our clients is this band Whiskey Myers, and they're a pretty dirty, heavy Americana rock and roll band. They released a self-titled album last September, I believe.
Yeah.
And this was the first time. They've always been considered country, but they were really pushing the rock genre this past album. But we did have a meeting discussing their D2C campaign, which is just basically all the merch packages that they're going to come up with. And so I never really paid too much attention to bands' merch. Stuff that I liked, I would just like buy a t-shirt at a show. Like never really thought much of it. But we talked for probably 2 hours about this band's D2C campaign and what sort of packages we could put together. So like, who is this band's fan base and what do they like to do? Well, they probably like to go fishing, so we should put together like a bait and tackle set that's like branded. Or we got some whiskey glasses that were they had Whiskey Myers little imprints on them, and just all over the place, like funny, like a barbecue set, and so that sort of brainstorming session was just like it was something that I probably never would have thought of this stuff, and it was wildly successful. And with the purchase of a merch package, you also get the album, and so it's just a way to tie it all together and really get the word out, and then also like treat the fans that are like diehard fans.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
And that's a pretty hard task if you're a solo manager. Whereas it sounds like this is an organization, there's a team of people that are looking after one artist, but there's also a bigger team that is looking after the whole kind of...
Yeah, I think that's what makes us pretty special. Typically a management company wouldn't have like a whole marketing department. And then we recently signed on a creative director. So we have a lot of control, and we are able to offer artists a lot and put in a lot of thought and a lot of energy into these. Typically maybe a label would be the one making the decisions for marketing and for creative design and, specifically like for music videos and photo shoots, and a lot of that is in-house. I mean, it's case by case. Some artists do outsource those things, but the fact that we're able to offer it to our clients is pretty special.
So is that, that's not really how management works here in Australia.
Right.
Is that pretty common in the States now, or is that more of a new thing?
I wouldn't say that it's super common. I know that 888 has always been very like service focused on like what can we provide to our clients and what would make them choose us over other management companies. I know that with kind of the decline of labels and the label, industry, and so those efforts that they would normally have for marketing or for radio is kind of either going separately outsourced toward marketing agencies or radio representatives, and so we've just kind of like swooped those up
Yeah.
and just made it, kind of a part of the whole package
Yep.
that we have to offer.
For sure.
Yeah.
And do you find that, I mean, yeah, the management thing in Australia is interesting, and I'm sure this happens in the States too, but there's a lot of people who have, especially at like early stage artists who don't have management, or if they do, it's someone that they're friends with who's kind of stepped into the role.
Sure. Yeah.
Or isn't necessarily part of a big team. Do you think that not having a professional manager or someone who's on a team, do you think that affects chances like South by Southwest and general career advancement for artists? Or
I think it depends. Definitely South by looks at those things, and if they're able to see a name that they recognize in terms of a manager or an agent or a label, like they're more likely to, they don't have to do as much to like figure out like, is this band worth it, or do they have something cool going? Like they can see that, and that's kind of like the voucher, but that being said, I mean, there are plenty of showcases that South by Music Fest has that are for unsigned bands, and they've done the research and they've looked at the numbers. A lot of it is like, how many social media followers do they have, or how many monthly listeners do they have on Spotify? And that's all great data that they use. It's unfortunate that sometimes it seems a little superficial in terms of how you're grading basically a band. But I think with the volume of people that apply, and it's just kind of like, it's what makes sense.
Just on that, we've had a question in on the Facebook page, which you can comment on, which is great. And we've kind of have some live questions. Steph wants to know the differences in the industry between Australia and the US. And I'm going to like squidge that question a little bit.
Sure.
And maybe if you've noticed, particularly with team members, I guess, I think there's a lot of massive differences which we could talk to, and maybe we'll get to that when we talk about the US market. But I'm just, have you noticed big differences with your experience in management in Australia? Or
I can't say that I have, only because I don't know the scene here that well yet. I've obviously been doing a little research and just observing in my time here. I think that radio is a huge thing in America, like major market radio. That's something that a lot of our clients push hard.
Can you expand on major market radio, just in case?
Yeah, and even I don't have the best grasp of it. It is like a monster that is probably going to take me years to understand. But so typically, like, you hear someone getting a number one, and it can take years to get there. And that's either through like Billboard or media base, but it's based on number of spins, airplay spins, and then it also includes like sales and streams data. But we have a radio representative at 888, and then sometimes it's also just kind of worked organically. But when an artist of ours has a single come out or an album, we'll have our radio rep pitch that to programming directors in certain markets, depending on the genre and like their history. And
you just talked about certain markets, whereas I think a lot of Australian artists think of America as the one artist. I've interrupted you.
Right. Oh yeah, no, you're fine.
Is that, I mean...
so I mean, considering like we have quite a large array of artists, a mix of artists in our roster. A lot of them are big country pop singers, and so they all focus on the country markets.
Which are...
That's a good question.
Austin? Or is it more like...
Yes, in terms of cities, yes, Nashville is the one. But in terms of radio, like there's big stations in certain cities, obviously LA and New York. But you have to kind of decide, like with the Whiskey Myers release, like we were going to push that to active rock. And so there's just a whole world of I guess outreach that you can do. But to push a song to radio is to try to get it to number one eventually. And it can take years to do that. And like, for example, Lizzo played at Austin City Limits last year. And when she was booked, she had been like on the scene for a while, was definitely relevant, definitely had a huge fan base, but she was, I guess, considered like more of a mid-tier artist playing Austin City Limits. And then over the summer, she hit #1 with Truth Hurts. And they had booked her for like a mid-sized stage, not quite the headlining main stage. And they kept her there, and that resulted in like impenetrable massive crowd. Like people were just straight up stuck. Like there was nowhere to move. And she played 2 weekends, and there was like this whole protest to move her to a headlining stage because she had just exploded in fame. And they kept her there, and she played there again and had a massive crowd. But I think that song came out 2 years before. Yeah. So it had taken her 2 years to acquire that following and get those plays. And
it does often seem to people on the outside that an artist has broken overnight. But from the sounds of things, and you know, it's pretty common knowledge, there are plenty of Australian acts that's happened to, where it's just been years and years of building and slowly kind of coming. Like Amy Shark's an example that comes to mind for Australian. And I mean, the same thing happened with Tones and I and a festival in Australia where she was booked before she got massive. And then they were like, oh God. Oh, yeah. But then everyone came early to see her. So, you know, it worked out well. Right. I mean, I think in terms of the, like, coming to that question about the differences in Australia and America, the radio thing is huge. And in Australia, there really is only one kind of indie alternative radio station, which is Triple J. Right. Yeah. And a lot of artists, I think, without that, it can feel, I mean, Spotify and streaming has changed that, obviously. But in terms of Australia and America, that's a pretty big difference. We've had another question going off on Facebook.
Oh, great.
A lot of work goes into, this is from Emma, into the campaign working up to a single album release. And what are some strategies to keep the hype once it's out? Which is a great question, actually.
That is a great
question.
Emma. Yeah, that is a great question. And yeah, from a marketing perspective, it's like, what is the magic answer? Like, what do we do? I think you can definitely put a lot of the work on your clients. Like, give them the responsibility to stay engaged with their fan base. And social media is a great way to do that. Yeah. But I also think, like, making the hype about the shows, like assuming you've you know, got a tour with the release, finding fun little ways, like hide tickets around the city to the event, you know, there's that show. Another great idea. Or, you know, meet and greets and contests, like pretty basic stuff. But I think using social media is a great tool for that, making sure that people haven't forgotten and directing them to the music, and then strategizing, you know, a release plan in terms of music videos or film clips, and making sure you have plenty of content, like ready to go. And it wasn't just like teasers leading up, but like once it's been released, you've got like another 6 months worth of content to put out there in terms of like visual content and ways to engage with your fan base. But yeah, I think you gotta, I mean, I have some clients who are a little reluctant to use social media, or they might not just have like the personality as they do on stage online, and you've got to push them.
Are there strategies that you use from a marketing perspective to help them with that stuff?
Yeah, we can keep it like pretty structured and like really get on them. I have one client, and we literally like break down every post that they've made in the last week, send them a report of like why it worked well, why it didn't, like here's your follower count as the days go on, and give them tips and advice, and it's working. Which is an amazing
thing to be able to do when you have a team, right?
Exactly.
Like an artist with, and that's the thing, without a team, it's hard to build an audience, and it's hard to build a profile, but then in order to get the team, you sort of have to have a semi...
Yeah, it's a little bit of a catch-22.
Yeah, it's the chicken and the egg. In terms of Australian artists in the States, I mean, there's many ways to do it, I'm sure. You can, but it's a huge investment, and potentially very lucrative investment to spend time in the States and invest in that market. But are there, I think getting over there can be a big barrier, and a lot of Australian acts apply to South by, get in, and they're just stoked and they do it. Do you think that the follow-up from South by, I mean, is it worth just going to South by, or do you think that there should be more to it? I mean...
Right. I think in terms of playing, and especially as an international act, doing what you can to make the most of it. And for example, like when my band played, we never even played an official showcase. We would just come down because we knew that there were going to be, there's going to be everyone from the industry down there, and not to mention just people everywhere. And we would play house shows, and we would play random bars. And I mean, we met our entertainment lawyer at a house show, and she was like, "This is what it's all about." Like, but I think if you can get accepted into a South by showcase, like that's definitely your ticket in. And then once you're there, just do as much as you possibly can, play as much. I mean, that's what everyone says, like they're playing like 16 shows in 7 days. But I think it's worth it. And you never know who you're going to meet. It doesn't have to be your manager, but it could be, another band that they invite you to tour with them, in a few months, or anything really.
And it's connections, right? It's friends, exactly. and connections. And I guess the other side of it is the follow-up, like the return. The return, it sounds like a Star Wars episode, but the return to America. Is that like, if you went to South by and someone said to you, "Oh, when are you coming back?" and you say, "I don't know," does that shut a door, or is it?
Oh no, I don't think so. I mean, I think people definitely realize how hard it is to get there from here.
It's long and expensive.
Exactly. It is quite a feat. And I think one thing, obviously, that you can do, even if you're not physically here, is just continue that engagement online. And that is what's so great about social media, is like you can make all these fans and then keep engaging with them once you've come back home, and notify them as soon as you're coming back. So,
and it's the same for radio and streaming and all of those platforms that are now... We're in such a global music industry.
Exactly. Yeah. Sure. So if you're, you've got a release on Spotify, and I mean, people in America, there's no lag, there's no anything. It's like you might as well be there. So I think the touring is definitely the hardest part, just getting there.
But once you're there, keep on coming back. We've got a couple of minutes left, and I guess I wanted to ask you what you think of as the future for management, generally speaking, whether it be here or in the States or kind of wherever.
Sure.
Does it look the same as it did 20 years ago, management?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I don't know. I think every manager's relationship with their artist is different, and what the artist needs out of them is different. I think, like I said, at 888, like we're very focused on providing service, like quality service, and being their friend, and almost feeling like a marriage, and doing as much as you possibly can to ensure their success and longevity. I mean, we have clients at 888 that have been successful for over 20 years.
Wow.
So I can't speak for all of management, but I know that, generally it's a very supportive crowd, and I think just seeing how the trends in music change and evolve over the years. I mean, over the past 5 years even, like a lot has changed, and just trying to stay as up to date as possible with the new technology and the new, whatever it is, the new trends. It's just like, this may live for a minute, it may live for 10 years, but we're just going to jump on and see what happens, and just try to stay
relevant. And I mean, the management model seems to be slightly changing. Even the fact that labels are slowly becoming less and less imperative for artists to be able to release music, that sort of thing. I mean, it's a much more progressive industry now, and there's a lot more scope for change and interest, I guess.
I think so.
Thank you very much for joining us, Celia. It's been lovely chatting to you. And we'll see you next time you are in Australia, or we're in Austin. Either way.
Gotta come to Austin.
Thanks, Celia.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.